Welcome, Thomas. Thomas, I welcome you to this value creation series in life sciences. To start with, maybe if you can explain to the audience your experience, your past experience, and what you have done and what you're doing right now, and what makes you so much exciting about working in life sciences.
Thank you very much, Saurabh, and thank you for having me. So my background is commercial to its nature. It's in medical technique and diagnostics originally. Then I became a co-founder of what is now a quoted company that is now in phase 2, which is working with the body's own protein to protect the kidneys against oxidative stress. So having left that company a couple of years ago, I started out as a coach here at Smile Incubator in Lund. And then I'm also working on a number of other early startups. So over the time, that has been sort of where I ended up, basically, in this business. So, and I enjoy it very, very much indeed.
Perfect, super. So I think we'll have an excellent conversation given that you have a lot of interactions with young companies. And I will start with one point. As you know, we are living in this world where there is so much of distraction. Okay, even if you are working on something, we get distracted, by some things. There is so much of plenty of information. And in companies also, you have a lot of distractions. Okay, and one of the distractions that I could see is lot of meetings. Okay, in fact, I know many CEOs, and most of the time they are in the meetings, right? So, which is not to say that meetings are not important. Okay, but my point is that if you are whole day in the meetings from morning till evening, when do you get time to work and at least time to think, on your strategy, on your plan for the future, or anything. So have you also seen similar kind of things with companies?
I couldn't agree more. I think that's a thing that is far too little discussed and far too little emphasis has been made on it. How does the CEO spend his or her time? Because what you have to question is that if you have end-to-end meetings the whole day, you do have to question what's in it and what do they deliver. Is there a clear agenda? Is there a clear target where you want to end up with the meeting? Are there clear decision points? I think we have a very bad meeting culture within this and in many other sectors as well, where the meetings are not structured, they keep going on, and they just eat people's time. So I think it's very important to sort of sit down, think through, what am I spending my time on? And what drives the company forward when I spend my time? Because I think it's very easy to be sort of swallowed by, we need to talk about this and we need to, etc., etc. And perhaps you do, and perhaps you should, but then you should do it in a way that is focused and that actually delivers something, and that doesn't run for hours and hours and hours. So I think it's truly vital for a good CEO to sit down, think through, what do I spend my time on? What are the most important things I can do to deliver the strategy for the board, run the business, develop the organization, reach the targets, things like that. And I think that, everyone should attend a school, basically, a meeting technique school, to get them focused. I think that's really, really important, and especially when the organization grows, because it's very easy as the single person running 2 or 3 other people. That's one thing. But when you grow, when you become 8, 10, 15, 20, whatever, the CEO, it's impossible to be around everywhere.
Exactly.
You shouldn't be.
In fact, your point of unstructured meeting got me into one of the things which I have shared with several of my clients is, and which I learned from Amazon, by the way. That's how they conduct the meetings. Not all meetings, but very important meetings, is to have a memo before the meeting. So for example, let's say tomorrow we have a very important strategic meeting. We have some licensing deals from offer from a company or so, whatever it is. Okay. So what I do is that, I prepare a memo, which will be like 1 page or 2 page maximum. Okay. Where I put down my thoughts, that, okay, how this license should be structured, and, pros and cons, blah, 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 whether we should build, rather, all that stuff. Okay. And then at the end of that, I also put some FAQs, about, all other unanswered questions. And I circulate with the team, so you have two options. Of course, the best option would be that you read prior to the meeting, however, in the large companies like Amazon, they read it during the meeting actually. So the funny part which I read about Amazon was that the meeting starts with 10-15 minutes silence, where everybody is reading that particular memo. But it's fantastic. You know why? Because what happens in that particular case is that your meeting is focused, because I have been in meetings which was scheduled for 1 hour and it went for 3 hours, for example. And you might also, and because, everybody tries to bring a point, we drag race and we, discuss and all that stuff, right? So I think having that a structured way of doing that meeting, and learning from the best, because what I interesting thing which I learned was that to be successful, you don't have to start from zero. You learn from some of the companies which have been successful, or people who, or companies who have even failed, to understand that what are the mistakes that you need to avoid, to move forward.
No, I completely agree, and the good thing with that memo thing is also it literally puts people on the same page. This is what we're talking about. This is what the meeting should result in, and by doing so, you cut away all the. And there's another thing with that technique as well, which I find very compelling. If you don't have a chairman of that meeting, or somebody responsible for that meeting, that knows how to conduct meetings in a good way, you don't need it when you have the memo instead. And that's
Exactly.
a good thing, because most people don't have the experience or the interest or the understanding of how important running good meetings are. So having the memo sort of takes away a little bit of the need of that person, because everyone knows that, aha, this is what it is about. So I like it. I think it's a very good idea.
Super. So, when we talked about this, the evolution of the company from, as a, let's say, a 1 or 2 man show to maybe 6 to 8 companies. So every biotech companies or medtech companies, they come to this evolution, right? Don't you think that the role of the CEO also needs to adapt and evolve? What I mean by that is the following. In the beginning, you could be in every meetings, right? Because you are the only man you have to decide, okay? However, once you grow to 8 to 10 company people, right? You have hired as chief scientific officer, chief medical officer, or chief whatever, risk officer, and so on. Wouldn't that mean that you kind of have to now you have to decide the balance between how much part you would like to contribute to science, how much part you would like to contribute to the business or investment or investor relations and so on? Because I think one of the, as you know, biotech companies are capital intensive, and you cannot talk to any company who can say that, no, I have enough capital, and I can relax for, so it's an ongoing process, right? But it takes a lot of time and effort to do that as well, right? What's your point of view on that?
I think it's again a very important thing, that to see that one's role as the CEO evolves over time as the company develops. And it could very well be that you're the perfect person for 1 to 4, but not the right one for 8 to 10 or 10 or 15 or so on and so forth. When you hire people, you give them responsibilities that they are supposed to deliver under. Now, if you as the CEO, insists on taking part in every meeting, you undermine those people. And you actually hire them for one thing only. They're better at what they do than you are. And that's going to drive the company forward. So it's a waste of time. It's a waste of resources. And it screws up the whole setup, basically, because if you as the CEO takes part in a meeting where you're not really needed, the focus will be on you.
Exactly.
And not what the meeting should be about. And you also, in a way, undermine the person responsible for for that particular thing. I'm not saying that you shouldn't participate in no meetings at all. That's not what I mean. But one should think through, what do I spend time on here? And does it drive the business forward and the organization forward? And it is different, if it's 2-3 people, you sit around a table and you can shoot the breeze and you can talk about everything. When things become, bigger, there needs to be a structure to run it properly. And you as the CEO has to understand that, oops, as the company is changing, my role is changing as well. And everyone in a company's management, that goes for the board, that goes for the CEO. You're only there as long as you can contribute to the development of the organization. Has it passed a certain stage where you are the best one to do it? Then it's not your turn to continue doing it just because you're there. Then this doesn't happen as often as it should, of course, we're humans. But, there should be a clear picture from the start that, yes, you're welcome here as a board member, but you will only be here as long as the company needs you.
Right.
And it's the same thing with the CEO in my book. You're only there for the company. And then we have a lot of other things that comes into play with prestige and pay and what have you. But fundamentally, everyone in the management has one responsibility, and that is towards running, developing the company in a good way. That tends to be forgotten, unfortunately. Okay. But it's a very important thing to have in mind, I think, because it's another thing with it is that it takes away a little bit of the personal, what shall I call it, responsibility, or when it's a structural thing and you can see it for that, then it doesn't become such a personal thing. It's just that I'm here to serve. I serve as long as I serve my purpose in a good way, and then it's time to take the next step. So it takes away a little bit of the loaded part, the human part of it, and the personal part.
So what would be your suggestion that you could share with the CEOs as well as other people as well in the team? Okay. Because we talked about this distraction part, right? And everything is related to distraction as well, how you manage and your time and prioritization and all that. So, so how do you kind of advise the people to not get distracted, or at least time for yourself to have?
You have, as the CEO, you are the one that sets the culture.
Very true.
You're also the one that set the boundaries around yourself. And it goes, just as well to the employees, to the board, that you are the one that are acutely aware of everything that's going on. And you are the one that need to create space for you and time for you to run it in a good way. Now, if you're in meetings the whole day, you cannot think, you cannot focus, you cannot deal with all the other things, even though many of us try to do everything at the same time, which is not a good thing. But as I've suggested in some cases, create the space between 2 o'clock and 3 o'clock. If it's not an emergency, you leave me alone. And so I can work on the other stuff, and not another thing. And by that, you create also okay. Let's. I have a funny little story. There was a lady on the eastern coast of Sweden, and she had 11 kids, and wow. That's a handful. But she took 1 hour every day when she read, alone in a room. And come hell or high water, nobody touched that door or knocked on it during that hour. And that was her way of creating the energy to run this very demanding show. Absolutely. She had on her hands. So she created space, she created calm, she created a place to think and read. I think that's not a bad thing.
I must say it's an excellent example because there is nothing a tough job than managing kids, especially
No,
for mothers.
they don't know the boundaries. So we are there to teach them where they are in best ways, of course.
Exactly. So no, I mean to say this distraction part, gets me to this video I talked about regarding Warren Buffett and Bill Gates. Anybody can Google in YouTube. It's a 2-minute video where Bill Gates was asking or trying to show the calendar of Warren Buffett. And as Warren Buffett doesn't use smartphones and all that, so he just showed the a kind of piece of paper, and in one of these the whole day he had just one. In fact, in one of week he had just 1 or 2 meetings. That's it. Of course, the idea is not that we cannot be Warren Buffett, right? But the whole idea essence is that you hire people, you trust them, and then you let that particular people work for that thing, and that's it. So yeah, yeah, great points on managing distraction. So maybe now we can switch over and jump to maybe our next topic, and which is mimetic desire. As I also talked in my last video, and an example I gave was my two kids, who fight for the same toys, right? And we always think that, oh, it's a children's problem, it's not a men's problem, but it is actually a, we all human beings
It's
are
a
prone
human
to
problem. It's not a
problem.
kid's problem.
Exactly. So and in that particular case, what also I have seen is that, of course, what happens to your neighbors, let's say, when I say neighbors, I mean in terms of professional context, yes, biotech neighbor or a medtech neighbor, you're in the incubator or whatever. If they have been able to raise, let's say, 100 million of all of a sudden, or 60 million, you tend to have that feeling, that I would also go to that particular path, where I so what is your point of view on this?
In a way, in a Swedish context, it's sort of self-regulating because it is extremely difficult to raise more money than you actually need. We don't have the American sort of understanding of risk. So, to my experience, the Americans will look at the project, can look at the risks involved, and they will add, whether it's 10 million or 15 or 20 million or whatever it is, but they will add extra resources to handle the risk, because they know, especially in biotech, that things takes longer and there are things that happens along the way. And it's much cheaper to have that money available in the first place than having to add it on later. Now, the thinking in Sweden is completely the other way around. Why do you need that particular krona? Is that absolutely necessary? And can't we not invest it instead? So I'm sure that the mimetic desire is there, but it's very difficult to sort of follow it in the sense that first of all, every project has its unique conditions and backgrounds,
Yeah.
and owners and what have you. So it's difficult to do that. Yeah, you can always have that desire, but it will be more difficult to fulfill it in our context than in an American context.
Correct.
So there are few companies, especially early stage, that are financed in what I would say in a way that understands risk properly. Unfortunately, these companies are found on the stock exchange, and that is perhaps not where they should be.
Right, right. So, so one part of the mimetic desire I also want to touch upon is one of the ways Peter Thiel, one of the PayPal mafias, um, used to manage their team, because when the team grows, right, there is a tendency to, and if you involve them in the same project, okay, there is always a desire to, because you're competing for the same thing, and then you're trying to show to your boss that it was you who have kind of contributed that work, rather than the other person, actually, right? So he used to give one project to only one particular person, okay, because he's he was a student of René Girard, who is the kind of father of mimetic desire. And so do you see that or have you seen that kind of? If you ask me, yes, I have seen in my professional life in the past, when I was working in a large company, um, where colleagues competing for let's say attention. But do you think that this is a kind of a problem? Of course, maybe not in biotech because we are already very small, but maybe in
Yes,
a
I think so.
big company.
To me, it's a big organization game or a large corporation game. A, you have the time. B, you have the resources to actually faff about with these things.
Exactly.
And that space is not really available, you know, sorry, in a small biotech company.
Correct.
But it shows part of our human nature that is not so pretty, I would say, where we're behaving like kids. We're adults, but
Correct.
we're behaving like kids. But it takes leadership to try to avoid that. And by that I mean true leadership, not just because you have a title. That you can see that happening and do something about it, and talk to people and say, you know, that's not the way we do things here. We are all supposed to be a team. We're all supposed to aim at the same target and pull towards that target. Those little games you're playing, forget them. And you know, if I see them next time, you're out.
Exactly.
So because it's distractive, it's subtractive from the aims of the organization, and it's just bad and irresponsible and immature behavior in my book. But
Exactly.
you need to be there, you need to see it, and you need to act on it if that is the case.
Super. Thomas, thanks a lot for your time. I really enjoyed the discussion, and I'm sure the audience will also be enjoying our discussion and learning important lessons from you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.